Thanks, Angela. Thanks for the invitation. Nice being back and talking about an important topic like this. And what I've found over the years of doing this is that people really tend to obsess over the wrong stuff when trying to answer this question about how to increase shopping cart completions and how to improve your conversion rates and do all the stuff that you've just been talking about in the intro generally. What they obsess over is stuff like what happens on the page. So the page format, the page layout, the structure of the page, the UI. They obsess over the number of steps in your funnel. Should it be one page checkout? Should it be multi-page? And to be clear, these are important considerations. These are important questions that you need to answer. And these are things that we test every day. But there's a far better angle from which you can approach that will give you far better results, that will be far more actionable, that will have more impact. And that is thinking about what happens in the mind of the user rather than what happens on the page. On the page, the stuff we spoke about, there's a limit to what you can do to that. What happens in the mind of the user, things like the sales conversation that plays out, much like you'll find in a traditional store environment where you have a salesperson that you can talk to, that you can ask questions of, that you can share concerns with. Those questions, those concerns don't disappear when you're buying online. They're still there. And it's your web page and your website in general that fulfill that role of the salesperson that answers or is meant to be answering all those questions and is meant to be conducting that dialogue. And to be clear, there is a dialogue going on. There's a decision that has to be made. And this is the stuff that we want to optimize. Yes, it plays out on the page, but it's really that psychology. It's really what happens in the user's mind that we're trying to optimize. And one of the arguably the most dominant source of information is analytics. And it's a vital source of information, but analytics, you can't get these insights that we're talking about now from analytics. It'll tell you what's happening on the page. It'll tell you where the roadblocks are, and it will give you a range of very important insights. But these things we're talking about, you can't get from analytics. You need to get them from somewhere else. And let's be clear about this. You absolutely need these information. The people come to your site with a goal. They want to achieve something, they want to do something, they want to improve an aspect of their lives. That's where it all starts, that goal. And that's what kicks off this conversation, this sales conversation, this dialogue. And they also have on the other side of that, they have fears and uncertainties and doubts. There's FUDs at the bottom there. And these are things that get in the way of them making that decision. It delays the decision, or it prevents the decision from being made at all. And that's what happens when people abandon, when they don't come back, when they don't convert from you. And it's these things we really need to have a good grip on if we want to make a big impact. Professor Steve Blank famously says, get the hell outside. There are no facts in the building. To get these insights, you need to get outside. Well, the great thing is you don't really have to step outside the building with a tool like Qualaroo. You can, using Qualaroo and other tools, you can, like email surveys and some of the things we'll touch on briefly, you can get these insights without stepping outside. And the most remarkable thing happens when you just ask. Your users will tell you almost everything you need to know to increase your conversion rates, to grapple with this question of how do we improve our KPI, whatever that is? How do we increase shopping cart completions? How do we increase revenue per visitor, increase overall conversion rate? It doesn't matter. Your users have the answers. And at a very high level, there are two things that we need to get right. We need to ask the right questions at the right time. And so we're going to get a little bit more tactical in a moment, but just at a high level for now, how we start putting this together, working with a tool like Qualaroo, the place to start is to understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve. So to know, have some question in mind, have some problem, some objective. This may come from something like analytics. So you may have observed in analytics a drop-off, a bottleneck, and you want to illuminate that area of the site. Analytics, it's often said, tells you what's happening. It doesn't tell you why. And this is true. And that's why you would come to an on-site survey mechanism to fill in that color, to understand what is behind that observation. But the point here being that you have to know what you're looking for. You have to know what it is that you're trying to solve, or what it is that you're trying to achieve. What is the metric that you're trying to improve? You also need to know who you are trying to talk to, who you're targeting. And this could also come from analytics. It could come from heat maps, scroll maps. It could come from your personas, if you have those. And then some other suggestions of how you would do this, the right feedback. These are obvious things, but it's worth repeating them, that, keep your questions short. Don't ask too many questions at the same time. And then one that I hope everyone is doing, of course, we want to make it as easy as possible with short questions and with giving people pre-populated answers that they can pick from in a checkbox or a bullet, a radio button format. But you also want to have some open response questions where you have a text box where people can answer in verbose language. And those are really important. And I find in my experience, this is where you get beautiful jewels and the real nuggets. And it's harder work, clearly, than trying to process something like a radio button format, but it's worth doing that. Michael, from your perspective, anything to add here?
Yeah, Johan, those are all great points. I'd love to just interject on a few of these. First of which, specifying your objectives before you start. It's so important because drop-off rates are a real occurrence, because survey fatigue is a very real thing as well. And when specifying your objectives, you want to understand that we should make it easy for the customer to elect not to provide feedback, because we want them to have a pleasant and low anxiety experience on site while still getting the valuable data that we need. And there are a few strategies that you can implement in order to get the data you need without being too obtrusive. Specifically, prioritizing your questions around the metrics that are most important to you at that time can be a very valuable method. In other words, ask the questions you need answered the most first. That way that you can have the most important questions answered. Even if the user doesn't get to questions 2, 3, or 4, you still get the most valuable data from those users. The second point, identifying the right target segment. Segmenting your audience is such a powerful method, especially when considering every experience on site as a sales conversation. Knowing who you want to reach out to can help you insert your questions into the right sales conversation, ultimately allowing you to increase the potency of your feedback. And then finally, including an open response question. It can be so helpful in not only capturing the customer's voice, but also in identifying any surprise issues on site. For example, we had a customer who, through visitor feedback, identified a critical error with their search bar functionality. And the search bar is so important because they were able to identify, so search bars, they help with fluidity on site, but also with credibility. And if you have a search bar that's not functioning properly, fluidity and credibility, because they're so effective in promoting sales, were hindering at that time. And so they were able to fix that and then ultimately increase their sales overall.
Thanks, Michael. And as we said, you need to find the right objective to start off with, but you also need to ask these questions at the right time. So I'll say a few words on this before we get a little bit more tactical and look at the actual questions and how you can put them together, and then look at some case studies. So there are some objectives that you might have, and of course this is a non-exhaustive list, as all these lists are. But for example, if you set out to understand the purpose, the intent, that your user come to your site with, what is that goal that brings them to your site in the first place, then this is something you want to show pretty early on in the journey, while that's fresh in their mind, before they get into it too much, before they get distracted, before they get on with the journey. On the other hand, if you're trying to uncover buying reservations, those FUDs I spoke about earlier, then you want to delay it. You want to delay it preferably until the user is about to abandon the site. And Qualaroo has a great mechanism that can determine with a reasonable degree of accuracy when somebody is about to abandon the site. And that's something we use routinely, a very useful mechanism to use in an instance like this. Perhaps you're trying to understand a specific issue. And again, it comes back to that objective that what are you trying, what is the problem you're trying to solve? What is the question you're trying to answer? And maybe it came out of analytics, maybe it came out of usability testing, maybe it came out of heuristic evaluation. But you might have some idea about browser issues or some question about a device that you want to answer. I've got some great examples later on in the presentation about how we use Qualaroo to further our understanding of cross-device behavior. And then you would target those very specifically. If you want to uncover missing content, so what else should be on this page, and this is something we also frequently use, regularly use, then you might use some of the things you see there. So when a user scrolls halfway down the page, the survey pops up. When they've been on the page for longer than a minute, or whatever that threshold is. And so you execute the survey in different ways depending on what that goal is that you're trying to achieve.